everyone, and welcome back to the series From Ashes to a New Beginning, written by yours truly, Stacey Holt. Artwork was by Pastelkittygoreart on Instagram, otherwise known as Maddie Kitty 1997 on DeviantArt. I'll leave her links below. I highly recommend you go check out her artwork. I'll also leave everyone that is collaborating within this chapter, which are Cat Noir and Adrien will be voiced by Darkstorm009. The voice I do not want to reveal just yet, but you'll probably guess who it is, will be voiced by Mackenzie Zollner. I'll be voicing Marinette, Ladybug, and the narrator. I hope you all enjoy, but before you click ahead, or if you're in the premiere, welcome. Some quick updates. I might start uploading more series along with From Ashes, as I'm getting a lot of requests of when Thunderstorm Season 3 will be out, so just be on the lookout. Now, Chapter 28. Pinot Noirs and Peach Sangrias.
Ready to go?
He smiled, opening the door for her. Of course! Where are we going anyways? She smiled back, walking outside. Adrien followed behind her, closing the door behind him and walked to his car. He opened the door for her as a light blush started to form. She got in the car, feeling like a real princess as he shut the door for her as she sat down. He walked around and got in the driver's seat and started the car, letting the silence answer her question. Adrien, is this a guessing game? Marinette rolled her eyes at his foolish games.
Would you like it to be? I had some things in mind, but if you wanted to guess, you can try.
He smiled. Marinette turned her gaze to Adrien, and she could tell his hands were a little shaky. He was nervous. Was he nervous because of the date? That couldn't be it. They have been dating for over a year now. Oh, he was nervous about meeting Ladybug that night. Oh man. Marinette sighed and leaned her head on his shoulder as she looked out the car window. In between the silence, they stopped for breakfast, but still Marinette remained quiet, thinking about how nervous and anxious he was about seeing who Ladybug was going to be later that night.
Are you okay? What's the matter?
He asked, feeling her head leaning on his shoulder as he was driving. It's nothing. Marinette could hear the worry in his voice. He was worried about her. This would be alright. He would be so happy to know she was Ladybug tonight. They were going to have an amazing date, and then she was going to have her big reveal. This would be perfect. Come on, Marinette. You can do this. I'm just thinking about where we're going is all. Adrien smiled and continued driving until they pulled up to a little parking lot near a little diner that she had never eaten at before, and it sparked her interest. She sat up from his shoulder and looked around. She didn't know where she was. It was exciting yet dangerous. If there was an Akuma, she wouldn't know where to go to transform, or if she needed help, she wouldn't know where to get the miracle box from her secret hiding spot.
Well, we're here.
He smiled, parking the car and stepping out. Where are we exactly? Marinette laughed, seeing Adrien walk around the car and open her car door for her. Marinette stepped out of the car and watched Adrien shut the door behind her. He locked the car door and took hold of her hand as he pulled her gently toward where they were going, still not answering her question. As they walked the streets, they passed by many shops and diners. Every time she thought they were going to be going into one store, they would simply pass right by it. She eventually stopped looking for a shop or diner and just waited patiently for where they were going and enjoyed the time they were spending together.
Alright, now we're here. For real.
He laughed lightly, stopping outside of a fancy little restaurant and winery. Wine? Marinette said.
Yeah, have you ever been to a wine tasting?
He smiled. Marinette shook her head and his eyes lightened as he led her inside, excited to be doing her first wine experience with her. You didn't actually have any idea where we were going, did you? Marinette laughed.
I just kept driving until something piqued our interest. The wine tasting and shopping sounded like a neat little date. I'm assuming it was a good choice?
Marinette nodded, and they were quickly seated at a table near the back. Special request of Mr. Agrest, famous fashion model. Special perks of having your father as a famous fashion designer. Adrien read over the menu and glanced up to see Marinette overwhelmed with the menu in her hands. He laughed to himself and saw the waitress coming to get their drink and food order. He leaned forward and took the menu out of her hands and saw her shocked expression.
It's alright, I got it.
Adrien smiled, turning his gaze toward the waitress.
She will have a peach sangria, and I'll take a pinot noir. Can we start out with the shrimp scampi and the meatballs with ricotta?
Adrien smiled, handing the waitress both menus as she agreed to his request. Marinette blushed, seeing how civilized and mature he seemed, not anything she thought Cat Noir would be when she was younger. She was absolutely mesmerized. He turned his gaze back to Marinette once the waitress left and noticed her staring and blushed.
What, is a peach sangria alright?
He laughed, a little embarrassed. Yeah, that's fine. It's just, I didn't think you wanted to be seen on a date, Marinette said, looking down at her fingers that were placed in her lap.
Well, that's why I drove us all the way out here. I figured we could go on a lunch date,
he said with a soft smile, noticing the blush on her cheeks.
Marinette?
Her eyes lifted, and she saw him staring at her. Yes?
After lunch, would you like to go stop by some of the shops that we passed? I saw you looking at them as we passed by,
he said, seeing her eyes widen with excitement. That would be amazing, she smiled. The waitress quickly made her way back with their drinks, placing the peach sangria in front of Marinette and the pinot noir in front of Adrien, then disappeared once again. Marinette looked down at her wine glass that seemed to sparkle in the dimly lighted room and saw the soft pink liquid inside of it with fresh strawberries, cut oranges, and ice cubes. It was something out of a magazine. She looked over to Adrien and saw he just had a glass with red wine. Somehow, her pink drink made her feel rather childish, but knew that it still had alcohol inside of it and she should taste it before she judged it. She took hold of it and took a sip. Her eyes lit up, tasting the sweetness and flavors of the fruit intertwining with the flavors of the wine within it. She looked over to Adrien, who was patiently waiting for her response to his choice of drink for her.
Well, how is it?
He smiled. It's delicious, she smiled back. Adrien smiled cheerfully and picked his own glass up and took a sip of his own, though Marinette fiddled with her fingers as she kept looking at her drink in comparison to his. It didn't take long for him to notice.
What's wrong?
He asked. Nothing? She smiled, trying not to give away her self-conscious overthinking. He smiled and placed his glass on the table and slid it over to her.
Mind if I try yours? Yours seems so good,
he asked. Marinette blushed and nodded, sliding her glass to him, and saw him take the glass into his hands. He lifted it to his mouth and saw her sitting there watching him.
Do you want to try mine?
He asked. Are you sure that's all right? She said, taking hold of his glass.
You can try it if you like. It's probably not as tasty as yours, I imagine.
He laughed, finally taking a sip of her drink. Marinette laughed and took a sip of his as her eyes shot open. She quickly drank the light sip she took. She tried to hide the disgusted face she made, but it was pretty obvious because Adrien started to laugh.
I can see that you don't like the pinot noir, huh? It's alright. Everyone likes their own kind of wine. I figured you would like something light and fruity. It's like, well, you. Sweet and cute.
He smiled, placing her sweet fruity drink back on the table and taking his own drink back. Marinette was speechless. He was flirting with her. Did he realize that? Well, he was her boyfriend, but he didn't have to flirt. Was he doing it on purpose to make her more flustered? If I didn't know any better, I thought you only liked Pinot Noir just for the name. You alley cat. She laughed, referring to the name. Adrien blinked and then started to laugh, catching her joke.
Actually, I know a lot about Pinot Noir wine. It comes from Burgundy, France. It's supposed to be light and fruity, but like you found out, a different kind of fruity from your peach sangria.
He chuckled. Yeah, I found out the hard way, she laughed.
If you want to try something, you just have to ask me. I could tell you wanted to. You don't have to keep distancing yourself from me. Why are you so scared of opening yourself up to me?
He asked, a little more serious now. Marinette went quiet, looking down at her drink.
Is it the Kagami thing?
No, I'm not. I'm opening myself up to you. I promise. You'll see. She looked up with a smile that made him a little confused. He didn't understand, but figured as long as she was happy and would be honest with him, as long as she would communicate her feelings and kept being with him, everything would be fine. The waitress brought their food shortly after, and they ate. Adrien paid for the meal, while Marinette, even though Adrien didn't want her to, left the tip. They left and began walking into different shops that they had passed earlier that day, and were having a great time, not caring what time it was or where they were. They could actually enjoy a real date with one another, and not care if their families saw or not.
Wait, hold still,
Adrien said, catching Marinette off guard as she stopped walking in one of the shops. She turned around to face him and saw him holding up his phone. He walked over and wrapped his arm around her and leaned down. He gently kissed her on the cheek and took a picture on his phone as her face blushed with a light smile. They both looked at the now taken picture, and Marinette's face turned a brighter pink when she saw that he saved it as his home screen and then sent it to her as well. He blushed and took hold of her hand and led her around to more stores as Marinette thought to herself, thinking that things couldn't get any better that day.
Marinette, is that you?
A girl's voice called out, causing Adrien and Marinette to both turn their heads to see a blonde-haired girl. There was another girl about the same age with black hair with purple in it standing beside her. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, you can go check out some of my other videos like Thunderstorms, which is Season 1, Downpour, which is Season 2 of Thunderstorms, The Butterfly That Brought Us Together, and so on. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys!